The PNV and the Socialist Party are funding a sex change clinic in Cuba that is owned by Raul Castro's daughter and Fidel Castro's niece. And you are paying for it with your public money.
No, I think it's a bluff by the Pentagon, quote unquote, because they know that, as you said, there is no clause by which a NATO member can be expelled under any circumstances. A NATO member can leave, although that's not easy either. Careful, also because we are privy to military secrets that logically no one would like us to keep or know if we were to go our separate ways.
As an immigrant and foreigner, I fully support the idea of priority for nationals. Here too, nationals must be doing well first to protect immigrants or foreigners. And honestly, seeing that they are not, there is a statistic that shows the drastic drop in Spaniards who used to have a second home and now don't. The number of people who have a second home has dropped by more than 20%. The number of Spaniards who need to rent has increased. See, they're living in rented places instead of owning their own apartment. Another report from the Association of Builders says that more than 400 billion euros need to be invested over 10 years to have adequate infrastructure in Spain. And then all that money is not really going to be used for that.
This scoundrel, no matter that he's 90 years old, is a scoundrel. He used to shout that Spain is robbing us. Spain is robbing us, scoundrel. You have given your family billions. You have taken billions to Andorra and God knows to what other countries. And what's worse, children from many generations of Catalans have been educated in Catalan schools with this slogan, Spain is robbing us, creating hatred against us. That's why the independence movement. It grows among the younger part of society because these are generations of children who have used their high school education, imbued with a false and manipulated history that painted Spain as the villain compared to the supposed goodness of Catalan or Basque separatism, where the same thing happens. Also in Galicia, the same thing is starting to happen.
Castillon Confidencial.
By Albert Castillon.
My insurance sponsors the editorial on Castillon Confidencial.
Welcome. How are you, Confidentials? Thank you for being there, for supporting this space for free expression. Here we are in the trenches of reporting, full of energy and enthusiasm. And to tell you incredible stories, the first one I'm going to tell you should have been front page news, at least in Spain or in the Basque country. But that wasn't the case. Miren, hay una organización which is run by the daughter of Raul Castro, that is the family of the Castro dictators, which receives aid from the Basque government for sex changes, even for children. The story should at the very least be scandalous. They received the last subsidy 5 years ago, just recently, and maybe they still receive subsidies from other Spanish administrations. I'll tell you what really happened because it's relevant now that the FBI is already in Cuba. We've already told you that there's negotiation between the United States government and the Casas family para que abandonen la dictadura después de... The government on the island being part of those agreements, closing deals. The FBI in Cuba locates a 10-year-old American boy who was illegally taken by his father from the state of Utah in the United States. The father of this boy fled with him. The father is transgender and fled to Cuba from Utah with his current partner. What for? To operate on his 10-year-old son and change his sex. Yes, in Cuba, it's possible if you're 10 years old and have $10,000, which is what they were asking for the procedure. According to the father of this poor child, the child identifies as a girl. And since in Utah, this procedure is prohibited until you turn 18 years old, well, the quickest way is to come up with the money and travel to Cuba. He did it through Canada and other countries to throw people off until he arrived in Cuba. Last April 13th, the state court ordered that the custody of this child be given to the mother. But the father had already taken her. They were already on that journey that took them to Havana. The cost of the procedure, as I mentioned, is $10,000 for a sex reassignment surgery. Age doesn't matter. When the FBI learned that the procedure was going to take place, they arrested the biological father and his partner and freed the child, who is now in the hands of the mother. There are criminal charges against both of them for parental kidnapping as well as other offenses. But who was going to perform the surgical procedure? Well, that's easy. Raul Castro's daughter, Fidel Castro's niece. She runs what you're seeing here, the National Center for Sexual Education. It's called CineSex. It's in Cuba. In 2005, she herself, her father, and the Castros have promoted it. It's very simple. She herself drafted the law that in 2008 allowed free surgeries for Cubans who wanted to change their sex. That is, in Cuba, you can't eat, you can't have light or electricity, but you can change your sex for free. Her uncle Fidel and her father Raul, this is how they whitewashed a regime like Cuba's, which throughout its history massacred, imprisoned, and tortured homosexuals. It was a whitewash. This CineSex is just a whitewash. The writer and contributor to this program, Zoe Valdez, tells us much more about what we're talking about.
The sex change business in Cuba is carried out through CineSex, which is a kind of organization. It's very similar to the Federation of Cuban Women, the FMC, which was created by Vilma Espin, Mariela Castro's mother. It's the same style, except that Mariela Castro and then the FMC have registered it as an NGO. Those NGOs receive large sums of money from Europe. She even comes, Mariela Castro, to the Sorbonne to give lectures on the subject. I reported it at the time. These sex changes started being done many years ago to clean up the image of the uncle, who was a persecutor of homosexuals, who created concentration camps, the UMAP, production aid units, which were nothing more than concentration camps for homosexuals, religious people, and dissidents. This was done in the 60s and 70s. This was reported, and honestly, very few people, justice was never really served for this.
Look, this little setup is registered as a non-governmental organization, as an NGO. And in Europe, we're so foolish that Norway gives them 300,000 euros, or the Basque government 120,000, at least as far as we know, in 2019. Yes, the Basque Nationalist Party and the Socialist Party fund it. A sex change clinic in Cuba, which is owned by Raul Castro's daughter, Fidel Castro's niece. And you pay for it with your tax money. It should be said that CNSX receives millions from organizations close to open society, that is, from George and Alexander Soros, and of course also from the Ford Foundation. The entire LGBT movement is funded by this guy. De subvenciones. Mariela Castro is married to an Italian man. That's curious because in Cuba, they don't allow a Cuban woman to marry a foreigner. They don't even allow her to see him often or spend time with him. Laws from the past to have absolute control over the population. This sex change center run by the Castros has even received an award from the UN, the United Nations. Can you believe it? Where does the money go? Well, it goes into the pockets of Mariela Castro, who has undoubtedly become a millionaire through this. She takes part in all the LGBT demonstrations, receives awards, and as you heard from Zoe Valdez, she even goes to the Sorbonne to give us lessons. Not about dictatorship, which you know about, but about sex change procedures. I insist that this is just a way to whitewash a regime, the Castro regime, which has massacred homosexuality. The UMAP were military units to aid production. Zoe was telling the story, and you are seeing photographs. Concentration camps, forced labor camps in agriculture. They put homosexuals there, also anyone who was Catholic or any young person they considered antisocial, meaning someone who was against the revolution. Some died, others, they said, managed to become men after re-education through beatings and torture. Today, they continue to imprison them. They die malnourished and without medicine, as we have already mentioned here. This is what they want to do, whitewash the Castro regime. At least 30,000 men went through the UMAP, then they were closed, but the methods have remained. The Castro dictatorship continues to beat and torture homosexuals. And any minor who, because of indoctrinated parents, wants to change their sex, unfortunately, if they pay, they can do it there. Several procedures are performed each week, and people from all over the world come to that clinic. Friends, this year we promised that the dictatorship in Cuba would end. That promise comes to us from sources very close to the Pentagon and the White House. If that's the case, let's start with centers like this one that have made the worst dictators on the planet rich. Welcome, we're investigating.
The Miss Seguros app has sponsored the editorial of Castillon Confidential. Download Miss Seguros, the easiest and fastest way to manage all your insurance in one place.
Can you imagine not paying your health insurance for a whole year? At Miss Seguros, we're giving away a year of free health coverage for you. Participating is very easy. You just have to recommend our app to 2 friends, and each of them needs to upload at least one policy through the application. You have until April 30th. On May 8th, we'll announce the winner on our social media.
Castillon Confidencial by Albert Castillon. It had never happened before, and in fact, NATO doesn't have protocols to expel one of its members. It's not even written in the articles how to expel someone who doesn't comply. There are protocols if a country wants to leave. The Pentagon, in a document, asks Donald Trump to expel Spain from NATO. And Donald Trump wants to do it. What's happening? Is it happening, or is it just a matter of diplomacy and maybe a few days? Or will Pedro Sanchez support another enemy of Donald Trump again, as he has done with all of them? The latest one being Iran. But anyway, let's forget about politics. How would that affect us Spaniards, being out of NATO? Lieutenant Colonel Francisco Vendala, how are you? Very well, Albert. Delighted to be with you. Tradito Confidential. Hugs. It would change our lives a lot. Well,
I think so, Albert. You said it very well at the beginning. Let's see what would happen if they kick us out or if we leave. In this case, it would mean not being in NATO. Let's see. The first thing we would have is the loss of the collective defense clause, the famous Article 5, which says that if anyone attacks a NATO member, all of NATO is considered attacked. That is, if anyone attacked us, we would have to defend ourselves alone in the world, like Gary Cooper, right? Alone before NATO, okay? Another important thing, geopolitical vulnerability. People don't usually take this into account, but it's also very important. That is, our insecurity in the face of rival powers would increase. We have to keep that in mind. We're not alone in the world, and we're in such an important area as the West. And besides, Spain is the center, let's say, of the world, if you'll pardon the redundancy. Above us are Europe, Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Atlantic. We have an essential geopolitical and geostrategic position. Another thing that will affect us, well, if we're not in NATO, we have to increase our defense capability, Albert. We will have to spend more on defense because today there are things that NATO provides us. There are things we collaborate on. There are things in defense, that NATO covers for us. Without us having that weaponry, those technical resources and so on, then we would have to start spending much more on defense. And what else would this bring? Well, it would also have a negative impact on defense industry cooperation because we would automatically withdraw from a lot of defense projects that NATO is carrying out. And of course, we would have to leave them behind. Our defense industry would be diminished. That is, it would lose contracts. That is also very important. Then, logically, Albert, let's see, we're in the West, in Europe. If we leave NATO, what do? Well, in some way, it seems like we're turning our backs on our own sphere, the one we live in. So what are we then? Some kind of outcasts? We can't be Switzerland because Switzerland is a tiny country. It's a buffer state. Nobody is interested in invading or attacking it or anything, but we're in a completely different situation. I mean, all these things would harm us. The only thing that wouldn't harm us is the issue of Ceuta and Melilla, because Ceuta and Melilla, as we know, are not under NATO's umbrella. That was handled terribly. So we would still have our enemy to the south who at any moment could do something, even militarily, to take Ceuta and Melilla from us. We already know that Morocco's most important friend is the United States, its powerful backer. With how angry he is, well, you can imagine. I mean, if he already did it with the Sahara, well, now all these things, that loss of collective defense, that geopolitical vulnerability, the defense autonomy that we would have to increase. And losing those contracts would be, without a doubt, I think, from my point of view, the biggest losses, that they kick us out, which they can't, or that we leave NATO maybe.
Sanchez said that no United States base in Spain would participate in the war with Iran, nor would they allow their airspace to be used for overflights. That's a lie. There are already 6 ships at the Rota base. The last one arrived a few hours ago, carrying guided missiles on their way to Iran and stopping to refuel, each with more than 300 soldiers. If we leave NATO in the plan that the Pentagon has prepared for Trump, it includes closing the Rota base and closing the Moron base. I've been around there, and for the towns and cities in the area, this is a disaster.
It's like a tidal wave, a tsunami, a catastrophe. As you said, most of the production, most of the commerce, and many other things depend on these joint American-Spanish bases. It would be terrible. It would also economically ruin those areas that still depend on those bases. That's another thing, and on top of that as well. Albert, you made an important point we need to remember. The United States could actually decide to close those bases, to leave those bases, because they are shared with Spain. The fact that they have been made available to NATO doesn't mean that they are part of NATO. But just imagine what you said, a monumental catastrophe for those areas.
And the possibility that that madman Sanchez gets us involved with the BRICS, with the Chinese, with Maduro, with Putin, does that exist or not?
Well, I think it exists in his head because, as you just said, this man is not right in the head, pardon the redundancy. But look, Albert, we are in the part of the world where we are. We are who we are. We belong to a Western civilization which has its norms, it has its rules. And what we can't do now is align ourselves with the other side of the world, which also isn't developed, which also isn't structured, which doesn't have the power they claim. They want to have it, but they can't achieve it. And then we would be outcasts, Albert. We would not only be complete pariahs, and economically Spain can't handle that because we're not exactly a prosperous country economically or commercially speaking.
You know that Sanchez said he's not worried. Well, listen to him about this controversy over expelling him from NATO.
We fulfill our obligations. We are a loyal partner. We are committed, deployed in many of these areas that have been requested by the countries themselves, and therefore absolute peace of mind.
In your opinion, and this is the last question, Lieutenant Colonel Vendala, is this a bluff from the Pentagon or is it serious?
No, I think it's a bluff from the Pentagon, so to speak, because they know that, as you said, there is no clause by which a NATO member can be expelled under any circumstances. A NATO member can leave, although that's not easy either. Be careful. Also because we are privy to military secrets that logically no one would like us to keep or know if we were to go our separate ways. I think it's just another one of Trump's moves, obviously to put pressure on us and try to make this guy of ours has a moment of clarity every now and then, and above all stops harming us Spaniards. Because the one this man is hurting is not NATO or the United States. Let's not fool ourselves. We are not the main member of NATO. No, the ones he's hurting are Spain and the Spaniards. He makes us look ridiculous, turning us into a country no one respects, that the world laughs at and doesn't understand. Into a country he is also isolating economically and commercially. And that, for me, is the worst thing about this bizarre character, who is completely out of touch. It's a shame because in the end, for the United States, one more base or one less base doesn't really matter. They'll have them anyway. They'll get them somewhere else. But the one this individual is hurting is us. The sooner we get rid of him, honestly, the better, because he's more dangerous than a monkey with a hand grenade, you see? What?
That's a good comparison. Well, dear Francisco Vendala, it's been a pleasure. I hope to have you back here on the panel one of these days.
Thanks. Hugs to you and your confidants. See you.
Castillón Confidencial, de Albert Castillón.
I lost my job and I could only rely on credit cards and loans to get by. Until I lost my house, I lost my family, and even then I still couldn't get rid of my debts.
If you are in a situation of insolvency, contact us and we will tell you if you meet the requirements of the Second Chance Law. Sindeuda Group, your second chance.
Welcome to the world of Vichy Catalan, where authenticity and health go hand in hand. Here we know how to enjoy ourselves and also how to take care of ourselves, a place to make every moment unique and savor it intensely. We look forward to seeing you at Vichy Catalan Sparkling Waterhouse.
Gentlemen, in Spain, we know very well that the left has always killed more than the so-called far right. From ETA, El Grapo, the FRAP or the GAL organized by the PSOE or Paracuelos or the Checas, or the assassination of Calvo Sotelo, Canovas, Canalejas, Dato, or the very assassination of Carrero Blanco. But this has also been happening in the world lately, especially in recent years. Look, for the left or part of the left, not all of them are brainless. These are acts of justice. They are not considered acts of murder. Some, as we told you in a video on Sunday, some focus on insulting Trump. They badmouth him. Others incite those lone wolves who end up attacking him. Any journalist who comes to Spain, who watches or listens to any mainstream radio or TV outlet, not a single one defends Trump. Not a single one, not even when he removed Maduro from Venezuela. They all criticize him constantly and habitually. They all focus on his worst moments of the day to ridicule him and make him look like a puppet, like a doll. These are campaigns. Don't think for a second that this is improvised. Look, Bolsonaro was stabbed and Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, he was also shot at close range and survived by a miracle. Or Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese Prime Minister, who was also killed while giving a speech by a homemade firearm used to assassinate him. We could continue the list among the right-wing figures who have been shot in recent months. I'm sure you remember Kirk. He became very popular in debates in the United States. Kirk's wife was at the hotel in Washington at the Hilton. That's where, once again, the man who could change things was killed. Or Miguel Uribe Turbay, the man who could take the presidency away from Gustavo Petro, vilely murdered during an election campaign. Gentlemen, the left not only kills, but also justifies its killings. And we are worried because public opinion, the press, the majority, they focus on the far right as the most dangerous, the greatest risk to any democracy. Someone is saying one thing and doing the opposite. Carlos Marcos, political analyst. How are you? How's it going?
Good morning, Albert. Well, look, since I imagine you expect me to be angry, I'll tell you I'm not. Today, I'm not angry, Albert. I'm super angry.
Well, we're off to a good start. There are so many reasons I have to ask which one.
The hypocrisy of the left. They have always manipulated the message, saying that the right is violent, very violent. But all the attacks I see come from the left. The shots always go in the same direction. You just mentioned it. Only in Spain, the left killed 4 prime ministers indeed. Cánovas, Canalejas, Dato, and Carrero himself. Members of the Socialist Party killed Calvo Sotelo after a speech by La Pasionaria in Congress. That man spoke today for the last time, and it truly was. But when they talk about violence, and show images of those tents that Vox sets up, all the images I see are of people attacking those tents. I don't see the Vox people attacking the people who are there. But the thing is, Largo Caballero, a socialist, carried out a coup d'etat in 1934. When he was about to be tried, the prosecutor accusing him was murdered. But the thing is, Indalecio Prieto, a socialist, pulled out a gun at the entrance of the Congress of Deputies and later made up that a SIDA deputy had shown another gun, something that was never proven. It was on July 4, 1934, when Largo Caballero was preparing the coup d'etat. And I say this because this was the breeding ground for what happened in 36. Because the memory of these idiots starts on the day the Civil War began. This started earlier, when they killed 4,000 Spaniards before the war even began in Paracuelos de Jarama, the communist left-wing government that was in Spain. So that's enough. In the United States, there was an attack against Ronald Reagan, a left-wing attack. The very attack against JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, had the signature of a communist and an organization behind it. And yet they are spreading the message that the violent ones are the right wing. Not just the far right, just for wearing a little bracelet with the Spanish flag on your wrist, they already call you a fascist, and that already generates violence. Pero la gente de derechas, we don't respond with violence. Vox has its own ideas, they present them and ask for people's votes, and more people are voting for them. But I haven't seen Vox being violent, physically attacking anyone, much less shooting anyone. I mean, this message from the left, manipulated, absolutely manipulated to target those of us who don't think like them, is an act of tremendous hypocrisy. If there's violence, and there is. If there's polarization, and there is. It's being fueled by the left and the far left. Enough of making right-wing people look like the bad guys. No, I'm right-wing and I'm not violent. If someone tries to hit me, they should be ready to get hit back, maybe even harder.
Yes, sir, Gabriel Araujo, our dear computer expert. How are you, my friend?
How's it going? Morning, Albert and Carlos. Greetings to everyone who's aware.
Here, public opinion is also manipulated by a press that is unanimous. Even if it's from the Popular Party or close to the PP, it bashes Trump just like La Sexta, Cuatro, Telecinco, Antena 3 El País, or any digital outlet. There isn't a single media outlet that doesn't make a caricature of him. And then the consequence is what it is, right?
Yes, indeed. We've been experiencing this for quite some time now. And it's gotten to the point where the workers themselves, for example, from Spanish radio and television, have risen up against the morning shows on Spanish television because of the clear bias in almost all of their commentary and even the news, right? And in Trump's case, he is indeed one of the main victims of this unparalleled journalistic bias. Because we had never seen Spanish television so biased or so slanted against the president of a friendly nation like the United States, right?
Yes, but one manipulates, the other shouts or objectifies the person, and there's always a crazy person who gets an idea and tries to shoot. Listen to Ana Gile and Maria about what happened with Trump.
This means that he can't be doing too badly since there are people who want to take him down, well, in some way, so that he doesn't achieve his goals, right? It's also hard to understand how, with the security detail and the resources he has, I mean, honestly, with the infrastructure he has, someone could get to the point of trying that. To make another attempt on his life.
If anyone imagines going to the Treasury or some official agency and sneaking in with a shotgun, does anyone really believe you can just walk into an official agency like that? How is it possible that at a dinner with the President of the United States, a guy like that can sneak in if this isn't organized?
Of course, they're going after Trump. They really want to get him out of the way. But it's not just that. Now they're going after the people because that's what we've seen. This shooting wasn't just aimed at Trump. It was really meant to scare and take out most of the people who were there.
Well, and what effect would it have? A multiplier? They were all journalists. The correspondents were there 3 times in 2 years, Gabriel, and all 3 times they were Democratic voters. And of course, you mentioned the Democrats. Some voters want to kill Trump. It's outrageous. But a survey has been conducted, and among the Democrats, 30-something% consider it an option. It's crazy.
Well, and then they say that we are the haters, that we are the ones full of hate, this and that, because that's the other narrative. Very perverse, hypocritical on this issue. Is nothing new, just as Carlos was brilliantly describing, giving that historical sequence, and you too, Albert, on a global level, not just in Spain. We already know that the main perpetrators of violence, and behind those great dictatorships, there's always the same totalitarian freedom-crushing ideology, namely the left. All of this, communism, socialism, and so on. And let's remember here that the former vice president of the government, Pablo Iglesias, when Vox got those first 12 deputies in Andalusia in 2018, was the one who called for burning the streets, burning dumpsters, and there were some really tremendous riots, and this was also very significantly silenced by the sycophantic press. And this can be extrapolated to all the countries in the world that suffer from this same kind of journalistic hypocrisy and bias. The fact checkers, let's not forget all of them. All the fact checkers, they all depend on them. George Soros from the Soros Foundation also actively collaborates in this completely fictitious and misleading depiction of reality. And we're in the situation we're living in. These violent scenes are happening, and here it's like nothing is going on.
Nothing. Here there are 3 fact checkers, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maldita, Neutral, and Spanish Radio and Television Fact Check.
Also EFE, which is the EFE news agency.
They're all either state-owned or belong to Soros, right?
Exactly, that's right. It's incredible.
These are the people we're in the hands of. I want you to listen to this man, Jordi Pujol I Soleil. He went to vote for Joan Laporta at Barça a month ago. Voting at Barça, yes, but testifying before the judge at the National Court, no. The court excused Pujol from the trial yesterday afternoon due to cognitive impairment. Look, I'm going to tell you how it is, and then I'll ask you, Carlos, and if you want, Gabriel, your opinion, because I'm ashamed, I'm Catalan. I've seen him steal for more than 25 years. Any construction company that wanted to work with the Generalitat had to pay 3%, and sometimes it was much more. It didn't go to government expenses. No, it went to foreign bank accounts. And the UCO says it's absolutely proven. In Andorra, 30 million euros, which at that time were pesetas, and that was 5 billion pesetas. Careful. They invested 25% in funds, 55% in currency exchange, and 10% in fixed-term deposits. For example, in 1997, they made transfers from Monaco to the Andorra account. His eldest son, Josep Pujol, who also had an account in Andorra, made 34 cash deposits into his own account alone. against the police, 2 million euros. We could go on like this because Pujol's lawyer, whom I know, is very good, and what he has done is delay the trial as much as he could. For example, in a trial, and you know what I'm talking about, Gabriel, with thousands of volumes and pages, he said, any personal reference to any of my clients must be removed because there are addresses or account numbers. Well, to review the thousands of pages, it took them 5 years in total, and the investigation took 11 years. And I get the impression, Gabriel, that both the PP and the PSOE are fine with this, that this has dragged on for 11 years, and now the patriarch isn't testifying, don't you think?
Well, and also let's remember that Pujol himself once threatened to spill the beans if his case went to court.
Listen to him, he said it in Parliament.
Exactly.
If you keep cutting the branches, be careful because the tree will fall. Listen.
If you keep cutting, if you cut a branch from a tree, in the end the whole branch falls, all the nests on it. No, it's going to fall, it's going to fall. No, they'll all fall.
If I fall, they'll all fall. It's a full-blown threat. Gabriel, yes.
Because let's remember that the pro-independence parties of Catalonia have always been key to the governance of Spain. All governments, both PP and PSOE, have always had to bow to Catalan and Basque separatism. And in this case, obviously, in order to achieve, I'm saying achieve in quotation marks precisely as a synonym for fixer, the government of Spain logically had to go through Jordi Pujol's offices. And what you're really saying about the fact that he has been declared unfit for trial when he has actually voted, again, we're talking about the fact that anyone can vote. Anyone can vote. Someone with senile dementia, a newly regularized foreigner, someone who was naturalized just a minute ago, the next minute they can vote, but of course be held accountable before the courts? No.
No, it's terrible. I'm especially disappointed in Carlos Marcos because we already warned about this. We already said this was going to happen. Marta Ferrusola, who was the one managing the accounts, suffered from Alzheimer's and passed away. And he was the one who supervised everything because he held the highest position. Now, he won't even stand trial, nor will he be declared innocent. He simply remains in a limbo. And if any of them go to prison, it will be the murder of their children. As it is, well,
we have to remember that first, these are issues that go back 20 years or more. Therefore, we have to acknowledge the Pujol family's lawyer for his great skill in delaying all kinds of proceedings. Because obviously justice that arrives 20 years later, when the gentleman is already 90 years old or something like that, things get complicated. But we have to remember that while all this was happening, this scoundrel, no matter that he's 90 years old, he's a scoundrel, was shouting that thing about Spain is robbing us, scoundrel. You've given your family billions, you've taken billions to Andorra, and God knows to what other countries. And what's worse, children from many generations in Catalonia have been educated in Catalan schools with the slogan, Spain is robbing us, generating hatred against us. That's why independent sentiment is growing among the younger part of society, because there are generations of kids who have gone through high school with that message, imbued with a false and manipulated history that painted Spain as the villain compared to the supposed goodness of Catalan separatism. The same thing happens in elementary school and also in Galicia, where the same thing is starting to happen with the growth of the bloc. Seeing the entrenchment of the far left and separatism in schools throughout Galicia, that's always been the case. But this guy, who is not going to go to jail in any way, must be dying of laughter when he said that if we pick one cherry, all of them will fall. Who was he referring to? But what's worse, he was admitting that he's a criminal. He basically said, you want to catch me, but be careful, because if you catch me, the whole church will fall. I've stolen everything I could. I'm going to report everyone else who stole during that period of the transition when maybe there were some loose ends that weren't properly controlled. But the truth is, this hatred that many Catalans have against the rest of Spain has been fueled. It has been ingrained through the schools all over Catalonia and the Basque country, and now also in Galicia.
I'd like to make a comment, if you allow me, and that is that the trial continues. It goes on against the family. That's how it is, but of course the legal strategy is going to be, no, this is the fault of the crazy old man who's outside. Is that how it's going to be? And then the strategy of delaying with undue delays, let's say that clause of defenselessness always goes against the accused. That's why the accused can indeed delay things unduly. And that's what the lawyer has done. Not only with the transcriptions and requests for personal data, but also with continuous changes of lawyer, to the point that it's the same lawyer again. First, he was the one who took over the case again. It's a shameful thing. Then there were also continuous delays to file testimony, to file a constitutional appeal, or to go to the Superior Court of Justice of Catalonia.
Gabriel, you've been following trials and also appearing as an expert witness for many years. Strange, isn't it? The media silence. No one has talked about the Puyol trial. Isn't that news? What happens is that the PSOE's press doesn't care because they still have Puigdemont, his heir, as a partner, and neither does the PP's press. Maybe they're afraid people will remember what Aznar did. Is that it?
There are many media outlets that are hanging from those branches that could have fallen from the tree. That's the issue. They're hanging from there.
Albert, would La Vanguardia even exist, for example, if it weren't for the money Puyol left to the Godoy Group and El Periódico de Catalunya, and so many others? Well, maybe it's just that we've been around a long time, dear Carlos, and we know all of them. Look at what we're talking about here. You pay and pay, sometimes with lives. Look at the footage we received today from a public hospital in Catalonia. It was recorded by a relative of a patient. There isn't a single inch of hallway without a stretcher placed awkwardly because there are no rooms and the overcrowding is brutal. It's been like this for months with spikes. Depending on the virus, the flu, the cold that comes, the emergency rooms are overwhelmed, and that's even before the wave of immigration has arrived. Get ready, Carlos, for what things will be like a year from now. Get ready. Listen to how they're exploiting that phrase. Pachi, Lopez, La Sexta, everyone, Bolaños, Belarra, Sanchez. National priority.
The national priority.
The one about national priority.
With the national priority, the national priority, the national priority. Let's not say national priority anymore.
Zapatero, they don't know how to talk about anything else. Is the debate about national priority still going on in Spain? The Popular Party has been thrown off balance. Vox, which thinks it's going to get a big boost in the Andalusian elections, we'll see if they manage to get an absolute majority or not. Juanma Moreno is finding that this message resonates with the public. No doubt, Carlos, because we all know someone who gets less help than someone who just arrived than a newly regularized immigrant.
Look, we have to put things in their place and give credit where credit is due. Vox has earned top marks with this proposal for national priority. They've set the political agenda as they wanted and started a debate everyone understands. That is, it's like telling me that I should worry about my neighbor's children before my own children. No, man, no, that would be going too far. First, I'll make sure my children have food on the table, and then, depending on how supportive I want to be, I'll help other people's children. Of course, Spaniards should have priority in those social spending funded by Spaniards' taxes. But for those who can't understand this, it's just that it caught them so off guard. They all make such far-fetched arguments, which only reinforce this feeling in society among the citizens. Does it make perfect sense that Spaniards in Spain should have priority when it comes to access? Because also, if what is valued for those social benefits is vulnerability, this million illegal immigrants who are going to be regularized, I think they all automatically become vulnerable people, which means they would have priority when it comes to the redistribution of social benefits. Of course, in Spain, it's Spaniards first, in England, it's the English first, and in Germany, it's the Germans first. And with whatever we have left over, with the money we can spare, will help everyone else. Because that's always been the way Spaniards have been, both here and when they emigrated throughout Latin America. That's how it is. But don't tell me that a guy who just legalized immigrants, who I'm vulnerable to, oh, well, there's your house. Hey, damn it, come on. A Spaniard who has been working for 30 years gets paid a miserable 600 euros pension and doesn't have any preference when it comes to getting an apartment. We pay so that people who need it can use it. Spaniards first, and then when another apartment becomes available. Let's look at the list, because I've seen lists out there where the first 20 names are all Muslim names. Damn, where are we headed?
Yes, listen to Almudena, Fabien, who's French, Ignacio, Lucy, and Manuel.
I'm going to tell you a saying, a Sufi saying, that I learned many years ago, many years ago. And it goes, help your neighbor, but don't tear down your fence. In Spanish, there's another saying that goes, through sorrow the plague enters. Well, that says it all.
As for all these people that we are regularizing, I arrived in Spain in 91. I've gone hungry, I've been cold, never.
I have never ever asked the Spanish state for a single penny. When I got my papers without a work contract, it cost me what it had to cost me. I find it deplorable for the people who have gone hungry, who have been cold, who have suffered hardship, having arrived without speaking Spanish, having had to learn the language, having had to fight, having had to save up money to be able to get residency and say, I want to live in Spain.
Spaniards first is a phrase that encourages endless attacks. I think a more appropriate motto would be Spaniards equal to everyone else who comes from abroad. And I say this because now we Spaniards are last behind the others. They monopolize the aid meant for the working class and the middle class, who have fought for generations to build a democratic Spain with social protection, which we see crumbling right before our eyes.
He told me no, that the certificate isn't given to you like they give you a card, whatever kind of card. This has to be, well, for a certain reason. Apparently, just because you have an apartment, that's why they deny it to you. I'm amazed at how they're giving out vulnerability certificates just like it's nothing, because it's been really hard for me. God help.
What I'm saying is that when all those people who have entered Spain illegally and have so much assistance are regularized, so as soon as they make them Spanish citizens, will they stop receiving assistance and face as many obstacles as nationals do?
Is that gonna happen here, Gabriel? In 3 years, they'll be shouting that they can't pay so many taxes, which is what happens to us.
Regarding their vulnerability, let's remember that the regularization process specifically requires them to provide that certificate of vulnerability. That's why we're seeing those long lines at the city halls. So it's already assumed
that they basically just give it away, that nobody investigates anything. Any NGO gives you the certificate and approves it without asking.
Exactly, that's the issue. So from that point on, they're already considered vulnerable. I want to say it myself as an immigrant and as a foreigner that I totally agree with this concept of national priority. It's logical, it has to be that way, but just as Carlos brilliantly reasoned, they really have to be there. Nationals have to be well in order to be able to take care of others. Just like on a plane, they tell you that you have to put on your own oxygen mask before helping a child. Because the person in charge, or the one who is, let's say, piloting or in that really important position to protect the child, in this case, it's the same to protect the immigrant or the foreigner. The nationals have to be well. And honestly, seeing that they're not, there's a statistic that shows the drastic drop in Spaniards who used to have a second home, and now that number has gone down. More than 20% of people have a second home. The number of Spaniards who need to rent has increased. They're living in rented homes instead of owning a place. Another report from the Association of Builders says that more than 400 billion euros need to be invested over 10 years to have adequate infrastructure in Spain. And so all that money isn't really going to be used for that, but instead it's being used for this, for organization, for things that, or for foreign development funds. All that money that's going to Angola, the Dominican Republic, to all these places, and do Spaniards really need this money? Therefore, I fully identify with this idea of national priority.
There's something very strange, Carlos. There are Moroccans who are not giving up their Moroccan nationality and are going to acquire Spanish nationality. and there is no agreement between Spain and Morocco to have dual nationality. For example, Spain does have one with the Dominican Republic, but not with Morocco. This system is full of holes. Everything is very poorly done.
It doesn't matter. The government hasn't even stopped to think about the consequences this will have. Because if we're already complaining about waiting lists in healthcare, do you expect to add 1 million or more new people to the system? This could be a real catastrophe. And what about the contribution these people make? Because they always say, no, it's that these people, illegal immigrants, contribute to GDP growth. But how are they supposed to contribute to GDP growth? If they don't even have a work contract, the work isn't declared. Because even if they wanted to declare it, they couldn't, because they don't legally exist. In Spain, they're selling us a huge lie. They're trying to make us feel guilty, like we're bad people who don't care about illegal immigrants. Listen, no, what we want is common sense. We want to help as much as we can. If I have 3 rooms in my house, I could invite 3 friends to sleep over, but not 300 because there's no space. I can't do that. The government is irresponsibly opening all the doors for them to come in. De cualquier manera. If they can't provide a certificate, criminal record, or only give a sworn statement, what value does that have from someone coming from outside wanting to get citizenship? Writing on a piece of paper, I swear I don't have a criminal record, is worthless to me. It's a world of legal uncertainty, a world with no guarantees. It's the world of double standards. The wide end is for the socialists and the narrow end is for everyone else, but they won't be the ones with the problem. Sanchez will stop being prime minister and it won't matter because he'll be a millionaire like Bono or like Koldo or like any of these people. Ordinary citizens, the ones who have to live with it, letting our kids go out on the street to try to play a little, which hardly happens anymore, right? But those of us who have to live with that situation, our wives, our daughters, they're the ones who are going to be exposed to a risk. It's not something made up. It's not an invention. It's not an isolated case anymore. There are already too many cases of attacks on women and young girls by illegal immigrants. I don't want to say MENA because they say it's an insulting expression. Well, along with unaccompanied minors, there are people who are suffering the consequences, and there are neighborhoods where centers for minors have been set up, and they're having a really hard time. Out of fear, because neither the young nor the old go out on the street because they're afraid something might happen to them. What kind of messed up country are we creating?
Celia Canovas is a lawyer, a former senator, and a contributor to this network. She sends me a message saying that because of the regularization, the courts are overwhelmed.
That lawyers are overwhelmed too. We are already starting to notice the avalanche of work that public officials in general have with this issue, the regularization of immigrants. I'm telling you this because I have a client who wants to request a court-appointed lawyer, and they're telling him to make an appointment for a month from now. It wasn't like this before. For example, I have a problem that I urgently need to consult with the City Hall about. We call the City Hall's phone number, and there's no way anyone will answer you. I understand that institutions in general, the justice system and the administration are starting to become overwhelmed, and we've only just begun.
Not just healthcare. Pay close attention, and then there are stories that I have a hard time understanding. Look, we've talked about this several times, Araujo. Regularizing is not the same as naturalizing people, but it's the step before it. Sanchez, up until today, has granted Spanish nationality, not regularization. So they can grant nationality to almost 2 million people who could vote for him. And we've looked at which countries, because I thought the first would be Venezuela, since they need it more than anyone, or Colombia. Right, they're also friends who are coming, aren't they? There are very few Colombians and Venezuelans here living off welfare. We can agree on that. These people come and work. Well, actually, no. Number 1 in breaking records is Morocco. It's the country that has been granted the highest number of citizenships since Sanchez has been in office. Is this a coincidence?
Gabriel, that's a very worrying fact. Albert, because of course it's not a coincidence. In fact, let's remember that Morocco has also increased its debt with Spain by 79% since Sanchez has been in office. These are official figures. We're not making anything up here. These are official figures. The numbers Albert just gave are official and verified, and no one here is making anything up. Simply by studying, looking, analyzing, and connecting the dots. With this data, we can reach some truly worrying conclusions. That eagerness to grant Moroccan immigrants citizenship is really very worrying. And as you rightly pointed out a while ago, it's actually illegal because Moroccan law doesn't allow for dual nationality. It doesn't consider the loss of Moroccan nationality, so they will always remain Moroccan no matter how much they become Spanish. Ahí realmente hay un limbo jurídico tremendous. And even from a legal and criminal response point of view, we would also have to see which court should judge them. Let's not forget also that this legal limbo can lead to absolutely surreal scenarios from a legal point of view.
Look, there's a video that I saved for you because deep down, the three of us are talking about the same thing. To change the electoral roll, which is Sanchez's only goal with this regularization. Are you gonna laugh? But this is going around on social media.
Listen, and all the votes you want. Prisoner Pedrito El Guapo has won another rigged result from the show and collect it now.
And Carlos, that's the plain truth. Another rigged result from the PSOE. Take him away and relax after seeing the footage of what he's capable of doing to his own people. Carlos, what surprises you? What will he do to the rest?
No, nothing about Pedro Sanchez surprises me. The footage speaks for itself. We've seen how he tried to rig the vote and they caught him. In fact, I'm being told now that at Ferraz they're going crazy looking for him everywhere. And the person who recorded that footage could have been at the circle, which has now been leaked, but it doesn't matter. Of course he could try. In his mind, he might be thinking about rigging the general elections. I have no doubt because Sanchez has no credibility with me, he deserves no trust. He's the kind of guy I'd never buy a used car from because he tricked me. That's how much of a cheater he is. He brags about a trip in a Peugeot 204 only to ask for it again. And that doesn't put him in a very good position. But what we're talking about here is very serious. We're talking about the fact that what has already happened in Latin America, in Nicaragua, in Bolivia, in Brazil, could happen to the government of Spain. And criminals who go from prison to occupying the presidency, thanks to the manipulation of information by left-wing media, by Soros, and by all the capital that invests in communist countries, because that's where they benefit the most. Yes, that's what they want for Spain. Someday we will know the real numbers, but all the poverty that part of the Spanish population is suffering, more and more, as I have said many times, they have killed the middle class. Yes, the pyramid, because the poor can be manipulated more easily. They're not interested, of course. Why would they be interested in people doing well? In having a comfortable middle class that could buy an apartment and maybe a little house on the beach to spend the summer, have their job. Many of the children worked in the same company where their father had worked for 40 years. It was an organized society. That doesn't interest left-wing people. They're interested in total upheaval, in disorganization, in fragmentation, in a broken, tense, polarized society. And if it can be with fistfights, even better. The left gets more benefits that way. Meanwhile, they line their pockets in the offices at Moncloa, dividing up huge profits and making billion-dollar donations to countries in the farthest corners of the world. We'll never know if they reached their final destination or if someone pocketed them. This is what we have to avoid. Spain is close to the edge. Let's not let it fall. Run.
You're talking about a time, and it wasn't that long ago. You and I lived through it. I was a kid, and so were you, just a bit older than me. You're talking about a time when Juan Manuel sent me a commercial from that era. I want you to listen to it and focus on the main part, the important thing.
Enjoy an ideal apartment at 150.
In El Oso and El Madroño buildings, where comfort and a family atmosphere come together. Luxury apartments that you can move into right now and pay for over 4 years. El Oso and El Madroño buildings, Avenida de Ronda, across from Nueva Iglesia, in Playa Lisa, Santa Pola.
Just 150 meters from the sea in Santa Pola. You can pay for it comfortably over 4 years. Who these days can pay off even a parking space in 4 years, Carlos? That's a joke, isn't it?
Let me give you a fact that's almost ironic. In that time we're talking about, which you and I lived through, and Gabriel almost did too, because he's not exactly a kid anymore. Do you know how much a Seat 600 cost, which was the most popular car? Converted to euros. 220 euros. 220 euros, 40-something thousand pesetas from back in the day. But those old pesetas went a long way. Let's see. People say, no, we're earning the same. No, it's not the same. Because with inflation, with the rise in inflation, and since taxes haven't been adjusted for inflation, because Pedro Sanchez has decided to keep the cost of taxes at today's prices, even though he knows that the salaries we receive have lost their value, maybe by 50 or 60%. That's why people go to the supermarket and say, damn, before with 50 euros I could fill 2 bags. And now with 50 euros, I don't even ask for a bag. I carry things in my hands. Of course. Why? Because you don't notice it. They're making us poorer because they've taken value away from our salaries, from the money we receive every month. I have a sister who's very funny, and I ask her, hey, how does the rise in gas prices affect you? And she says, oh, no, it doesn't affect me. I always put in 20 euros. Of course, man, but before, 20 euros would get you 20 liters. And now, 20 euros only gets you 3 liters. That's the issue.
Yeah, totally. And Gabriel, I'm worried that the ultimate goal, I have no doubt, is a possible electoral fraud in Spain that's more elaborate than any they've supposedly committed up to now. I want you to see an image from Peru. Piero Corbeto is the man in Peru who organized the first phase of the elections there. You know that, for example, in Lima, countless polling stations weren't open or didn't have ballots. It was a disaster. Well, the prosecutor has requested that he and others be arrested. Will we ever see something like this here?
Well, we won't see anything like this here, not even in our dreams, because Peru actually has an electoral authority. I always say that Spain doesn't have an electoral authority. It has executive, legislative, and judicial powers, but lacks an electoral authority. Few countries share this distinction. Other countries have an electoral authority with officials who make a career of it, take exams, and serve as authorities. And in this case, Piero Corbeto was the head of the National Office of Electoral Processes, and he has precisely resigned from the regulations. And he acknowledged those mistakes in the distribution of ballots, that many polling stations did not have all the necessary ballots in that first round on Sunday, April 12. So he has resigned from this. And this, resigning not only for electoral issues, but for any other reason in Spain, simply does not exist.
We won't see that here. Julian Amabel, Xavier, Silvia Guerrero, and Pedro are talking about the government.
It would suit him very well if NATO and the European Union left us out, if he is going to end up as the dictator of Spain, because then he could do whatever he wanted. This guy will stay here in Spain until Israel, Trump, and Morocco want him to.
The only way we can get rid of this Saul is if he is declared a danger to the public.
If it is known that the PSOE has paid under the table and therefore their accounts must be off the books and this is illegal, why doesn't the Court of Auditors open proceedings against them and start investigating illegal financing?
It's true that nobody likes Sanchez Diaz, but the people who vote for him, even if there's electoral fraud, do it for ideological reasons, that's all.
The bond between the United States and Morocco is incredible. I can't believe what's happening with Ceuta and Melilla. They're conspiring against Spain so calmly, and no one says a word, especially not Sanchez.
The bond between the United States and Morocco is incredible. Ceuta is something incredible. The idea of leaving for a weekend or 3 days, taking a plane, and then there's Melilla, which is also something incredible.
A perfect union, but I'm telling you that it is happening. Something is going on in Madrid. It'll be big. If everything goes as they tell me, it will be in May. It's not a gathering, it's a march. Incredible. You can believe it. They're conspiring quietly according to everything Sanchez says. And one thing
Albert, if I may, this relates to our current discussion and what we covered earlier about rigged primaries and electoral issues. And really, that video Carlos mentioned, that rigging, that moving of the ballot box, that rigging in the primaries, really makes Sanchez an illegitimate president. Now we can say it, if he hadn't been the Secretary General of the PSOE, he wouldn't have been a candidate for Prime Minister. So now we really can say it, aside from all the electoral suspicions. From July 23rd, from everything related to regularization, naturalizations, we can now clearly say that Pedro Sanchez is an illegitimate president because he shouldn't have been the Secretary General of the Socialist Party.
Yes, let's remember that was the first time he cheated. Then there was a second time when Coldo says that he and his wife put a bunch of fraudulent votes into the ballot box. So in the PSOE, Sanchez committed fraud twice. Just imagine when he got to Moncloa, and by then he was an expert. I have a message from Kiki for you, Carlos.
He's a person who seems angry and represents more than 80% of the Spanish population, people who think about the past, the present, and the future. And it turns out he's right. And all of us inside our homes think the same way he does. So let's unite and get rid of Pedro Sanchez and all the corruption, both from the PP and the PSOE.
Thank you. Well, we have to get angry like you. He says you're the example. Get ready. All of Spain angry, shouting, this will end badly.
You'll see the surprise you'll get this year when you host a Christmas dinner and our followers vote for the contributor who empathizes the most. I'm going to win, and you'll have to stay quiet because many Spaniards are angry. You're right. One thing, one of the listeners mentioned that they wanted to present Trump as if he were crazy.
I think she was talking about Sanchez, not Trump. She said that maybe the way to get rid of him is alleged dementia or a mental problem, which I definitely think he could have. The question is, which branch of the state tells him that he has to submit to a psychiatric evaluation? It doesn't exist. It's not in the Constitution. The Council of State or the Democratic leader? The council doesn't exist. Either he does it voluntarily or not, and he will never do it voluntarily. It's very concerning. By the way, they tell me to ask you to clarify, Gabriel, if the digital ID can't be used in the Andalusian elections. But in the upcoming general elections, it can.
That's right, Albert. The Central Electoral Board has reiterated what it had already decided, suspending the use of the digital ID and the MIDGT app as valid forms of identification until that QR verification system is implemented. The thing is, the MIDGT app doesn't have QR verification, so I think it will never be possible. It shouldn't be. But well, my ID does have it. But in fact, this agreement applies only to the Andalusian elections. There is no statement about the future, neither for general elections nor for other regional elections.
And by the way, today marks 1 year since the big blackout, Carlos. 1 year. Everyone is still in their position. No one important has resigned. They never told us the real reason, which we already know. To look good in front of a bunch of visitors who were at an official meeting and to shut down nuclear plants to say that we were very green, so green that we went dark. What kind of country do we live in?
Can you imagine if it were a right-wing government that hid from the whole country the reasons for a total blackout all across Spain? And they didn't give any explanation and no one resigned, and to this day, officially, we still don't know what happened. What's more, some people want to treat us like complete idiots by saying, well, this was just a thing, but no, it wasn't anyone's decision. That's bullshit. Let them repeat today that a year ago, the same distribution of electricity between wind, hydro, and solar happened, and today we have another blackout. The same thing.
Well, they've released a document, a self-serving documentary by Red Electrica, and it's shameful how blatantly they lie because it was perfectly clear that this blackout was going to happen. The reasons I told you the day after the blackout, and those are the reasons. It's that there was too much asynchronous energy generation from renewables, and it was necessary to inject synchronous energy capable of synchronizing the grid. What was it that obviously caused a blackout? I said it the next day. We know this from the report, even at the European level, and they've released a truly shameful video dodging the issue and justifying an action that was clearly totally irresponsible, which also resulted in casualties. Let's remember.
Listen, one thing, let all Spaniards watching us remember this. Of course, this didn't end here. Do you know when it will end? When all Spaniards have to pay the fines in the millions and the compensation in the millions as a consequence of the ineptitude of Pedro Sanchez Perez Castejon, who ordered an absolutely absurd energy distribution against common sense and against science. And he left us in the dark. But we are the ones who are going to pay for that darkness, not Pedro Sanchez Perez Castejon. He doesn't give a damn. The millions and millions that will be paid come out of our pockets.
We are already paying the electricity bill and the consequences of the blackout. Let's remember, for months now, the electricity bill has increased precisely to pay for that. No?
Here the mystery is what big favor does Sanchez owe Beatriz Corredor that he hasn't gotten rid of her. Look, if the manager of the PSOE, just to shut him up, was made the head of a uranium company, at $250,000 a year, Beatriz Corredor makes $546,000 a year. That's $50,000 a month. There's no position like that in the administration. Not even paid, not even Sanchez's. Well, not even Sanchez's, unless he puts his hand in the till, I mean. What favor does he owe Beatriz Corredor to put her there and not fire her after what she's done? Someday we'll find out, because in the end, everything comes out, and we'll discover what she has on Sanchez, so he can't touch a hair on her. Well, and the one they couldn't touch yesterday, I really enjoyed listening to Lieutenant Colonel Balas Gabriel in the mask trial. Antonio Balas is the one the government, the prosecution, Lereten, everyone went after because he was and is an honest man. He made it clear that Abalos decided everything.
Without Abalos, they couldn't have done almost any of the things they undertook. What does he do? The biggest things. He is the one who has the ability to take Dama and his partners to places they couldn't reach on their own.
Now the next level up is missing, right? After Abalos, who allowed Abalos to set up that huge business? Who told him practically the day after they started confining all of us during the state of emergency? They already had the business set up, the company, relevant analysis, the other one, everything ready, right? The one from Zaragoza, and they started distributing the companies. When will this reach Sanchez?
Without Abalos, this group couldn't operate. Abalos was the key that opened every door. But Abalos wouldn't have been able to act without Pedro Sanchez behind him, who was the one who gave him the key that opened those doors. But I don't know why Abalos, and I think at some point in this trial something is going to blow up, because prison is closing in on them, and not everyone can handle 20 years behind bars. Since there's no negotiation, and what's more, some hardcore XX plus members of the PSOE even attack Abalos as if provoking him, maybe he'll fall for the provocation and tell everything he knows. And Abalos knows a lot, and Zerdan knows a lot, because neither Abalos nor Zerdan could run the organization secretariat of the Socialist Party without the blessing, without Pedro Sanchez himself backing them, the party's Secretary General. Will we ever find out? Too late. Look at what happened with Puyol. He might die and we still don't know.
This week I was told that the one who could blow the whistle on Escoldo Garcia was, yes?
Yes. Besides, he has already said it several times in different interviews. He has hinted at it. Logically, and of course, he is the one who has the most information because he was precisely the link between all these ringleaders. The go-between, the runner, go and tell him. He was really part of this scheme, and he was the one who had the most information, and also the one who recorded all that information, those conversations. So, well, the news report itself, the UCO report regarding what you were saying about Sanchez Albert, really? The UCO report itself says that from the very moment of the motion of no confidence against Rajoy, from that point on, They began orchestrating this whole scheme. From that very moment, they started making those first contacts. So it's clear that this comes from or results from the actions of Pedro Sanchez himself, whether by action or by omission. Don't forget, he's also criminally responsible.
Well, look, 3 years ago, we reported here that Soluciones de Gestión was a company from Zaragoza that had no idea about medical supplies. And it's the one the gang chose 2 days after declaring a state of emergency and locking up the Spanish people. It was all a prepared, premeditated, and organized plan. What we believe was to finance the party and themselves, but let a judge say that. We're going to the newsroom. Susana Gask, latest messages.
Greetings to you from the newsroom, receiving those messages from our insiders, many important comments. Maria Luisa says that what can't happen is that young Spaniards leave their country. I think there are already more than 3 million. They are the future, not illegal immigration, not those who come just to live off the benefits. Annabelle says that freedom for Cuba is urgently needed away from communism and socialism as well. Maria Llorca tells us a story. She says, today, born in Melilla, around the 4th decade, my family built a fishing business together with all the fishermen from eastern Andalusia, who in turn formed a colony to secure their livelihood at that time. And they gave rise to an important fishing fleet, of which absolutely nothing remains. Well, there is a tribute boat with the names of all the boats that made up the fleet at that time. Thanks to the concessions of territorial waters granted by the Moroccan government through negotiations with the Spanish government and to the construction of new seaports. Here in Melilla, the people of Melilla feel abandoned, or we feel abandoned. Algira Garzon says, greetings to everyone from Tijuana, Mexico, right on the edge of Latin America. I often speak confidentially. As Nitu Perez says, I go to sleep listening to you and wake up the next day with all the news from my country, which is similar to what you present every day. Thank you for your voice, for moving toward democracy, for freedom. Warm hugs to everyone. Maria Dolores says she doesn't agree that all these people who are being regularized right now should be able to become Spaniards just because they are illegally given that nationality. That worries me a lot. Laboratorious Experience says, Marcos from 5th grade. We need a general mobilization, not just in Madrid, but in all the provincial capitals. Spreading the word through recordings uploaded to the internet or to important platforms like this one, and media outlets that are fighting the communication battle like Albert Castillon. Gloria also says that the king knows everything, he knows everything. The thing is that the government doesn't let him speak. He is absolutely anesthetized, almost like us. She also tells us, Antonia says, I'm from the Canary Islands and this is getting worse and worse with migrants who live like kings. They are the first ones to get out. I've been waiting 7 months for a knee surgery and here we are. This can't go on. Ana Montes also says, let's see if Sanchez defends us the way he's defending Ukraine, Gaza, and others like them. I feel so powerless. I'm also from Melilla and I live here. I live in Melilla and so does my whole family. Listen, what you're explaining is really scary and also makes me feel powerless. Elsa Perez says, Spain is in a black hole and honestly, Spaniards are in more danger every day. Garnisa says, I live in Tenerife and this is practically unsustainable. We'll leave it here for now, but it's important for you to know that we have channels so you can stay informed. And also a digital newspaper, CastillonConfidencial.com. It's as simple as subscribing and it's absolutely free. Thank you very much, Alberto.
Thank you very much. Marcos de Quinto was very forceful yesterday regarding Feihu. A short clip of the interview you can watch.
Feijóo specifically doesn't have the guts to deserve becoming prime minister.
That was the mildest thing he said, but be careful with what he said about Ceuta, Melilla, and the Canary Islands. Tomorrow I hope to have more information, but I'm getting very worrying news from the United States that Donald Trump's ways of getting revenge on Sanchez are convoluted. Be careful with Ceuta, Melilla, and the Canary Islands. So, Araujo, what do you think will happen in that area?
Well, there are already several reports, even internal ones from the Pentagon, that as retaliation against Sanchez's actions, well, it would actually support a conquest, not a reconquest, but a conquest by Morocco of the lands that historically belonged to Spain. I mean, this is very concerning. Sanchez is really causing irreparable damage to Spain in many ways, and this is one of the points that are very, 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 very concerning.
I'm sure you want to wrap things up, Carlos.
I thought you were going to kick me out without letting me have a short epilogue this time. Look, two things. One, I'm reading reports from American psychiatrists. I'm a bit upset with Trump. I have to say it. I'm glad he won the election. But there's a certain period of calm that I don't quite understand, nor do I understand why the Venezuelan government is allowed to pay Maduro's lawyers. If he doesn't have money, assign him a public defender and that's it, period. I mean, I'm a bit pissed off. But now I see a lot of psychiatrists analyzing Trump's personality, whether he's crazy or not. Where the hell were these psychiatrists when Biden was dancing with lamps and talking to curtains? They didn't write any reports. Second point, do you remember the front page, for example, of El País with a huge photo of a 2.5 centimeter little knife that some nutcase had sent to a minister? Death threat against the government? What would El País itself be saying today if some crazy idiot grabbed a gun and showed up at a PSOE rally and fired 4 shots into the air without hitting anyone? The far right wanted the assassination of Pedro Sanchez. No, now they're making things up, making up alibis. He was just a crazy kid, a good guy, you know? But look at the 10-point list he left behind, as if reinforcing the ideas that led this lunatic to try to kill the President of the United States. And today I have nothing else to say because I vent to you and it helps me get over my anger. And Gabriel laughs from time to time and I'm delighted.
What you said about Sanchez, be careful because Sanchez's team is looking for something. A dramatic move that allows them to turn the tables, even postpone the general elections due to an emergency situation. Be careful with what you said about Sanchez. I hope I don't have to take this part of the show and remind you about it in a year or less. Because sometimes you're prophetic. Dear Carlos Marcos, dear Gabriel Araujo, a hug to both of you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Have a good day.
Gentlemen, there is a group of patriots in Burgos who have been protesting in front of the PSOE headquarters for 900 days. We are going to visit them. You are listening to Castillon Confidential.
Attention confidentials, we're launching a new channel. Have you ever felt something before you could explain it? A shiver, a discomfort, a certainty that you don't know where it comes from. Your body knows it, it always knows it. Introducing to Cuerpo Sabe, a scientific channel where we explore those invisible signals that your mind doesn't understand yet, but your skin does. Sensations, intuition, energy, what you feel before you even realize it. Discover what your body has been trying to figure out for a long time. Tell you, search now for Your Body Knows on YouTube, because the body feels before the mind understands. The price of gold is reaching historic records. Those pieces of jewelry you no longer wear could solve many of your financial problems, but how do you know where to go? Javier Peno is discreet and has been buying jewelry, diamonds, gold, and top watch brands like Cartier from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s for 36 years. And he always offers the highest appraisal. He has 6 stores in Cadiz, and the main one is in Madrid at 7 Arenal Street. Don't get confused. Number 7 brings good luck. On the first floor, right next to Puerta del Sol. They don't close at midday. No one is going to pay you more. If you want to talk to Javier, call him on our behalf at 9159309491. 9159309491. Completely trustworthy.
Gentlemen, almost 3 years ago, the government of Pedro Sanchez granted amnesty to the coup plotters of the process. He pardoned some, released the rest from prison. That caused a wave of outrage throughout Spain. At PSOE's main headquarters on Ferraz Street in Madrid, hundreds of people gathered day after day. They still do. The same happened in different countries, in Spanish capitals. Many of those protests gradually faded away. There was nothing to be done. Pedro Sanchez committed many more outrages afterwards, and he continues to commit them to this day. But there are patriots who are still outside PSOE offices in different parts of Spain saying enough is enough. And there are some friends that I went to visit a couple of years ago in Burgos, in the capital of Burgos. I'm sure you remember these images. We had just started the YouTube channel. It hadn't been running for long and we had very few followers, but enough to start making some noise. Look, 2.5 years have passed. And that mark is reached around now, 900 days in which every day, whether it rains or snows, at 8:15, 8:30 at night, they set up in front of the PSOE headquarters in Burgos. And they shout at them, "Freedom, not in my name." And that's enough. It's worth greeting my friend Miguel Angel Alvarez again. How are you, Miguel Angel?
Hello, Albert. Well, I'm delighted to be here. And thanking you for the work you and your team do. And I'm glad that you've recovered all your programs after the hacking problem, whether the perpetrators were known or unknown. I really want to acknowledge the work you do in favor of freedom and democracy.
What you do really takes effort. What you do really takes tenacity. Naturally, in the early days when I went, there were a lot of people there. Then there are days when there are fewer. Groups of friends have already formed. There are family commitments. How do you manage to keep a protest going for 900 days? I don't think anything like this has ever happened in Burgos.
That's true, just as you say. It had never happened before. Being there for 900 days, rain or snow, like you mentioned a few seconds ago, isn't easy. What drives us? An inner conviction, an unbreakable faith that we're doing what we have to do. Our conscience guides us. We can't do anything else because really in Spain, you know it well, Albert, there's no democracy anymore. It's a dictatorship disguised as a democracy. The entire parliament, society, and the media are being held hostage. There are only 4 free media outlets left. And it's a moral obligation for each of us to be there. First, we're driven by what's inside us. If you're not convinced deep down, there's nothing you can do. And then we've been lucky. It's an honor to stand alongside patriotic people from Burgos, who are truly exceptional people and are there every day with passion and enthusiasm. Even Lucho from Ferraz is with us once a week, who travels over 100 kilometers every day going to Madrid and also comes to Burgos. And we really feel proud of what we're doing, but that's because it's our duty. And we do our part so that Spain can truly become what it once was, the golden age of Hispanidad and the brilliant past we had. And we have to recover it no matter what, because we have to leave a better Spain for our children, grandchildren, and everyone who comes after.
Everyone puts obstacles in the way, right? Over these 900 days, mostly from the PSOE, you've really gotten under the PSOE skin. But what has been the biggest difficulty? The city council, the neighbors? Which one has it been?
Well, there have been difficulties from all sides, as you can see. We've had difficulties with the loudspeakers, we've had difficulties with the neighbors, but they haven't been major difficulties either. They have seen, and now everyone knows it, the people who pass by, those who live there, those who see us, that we are going to stay there until the very last minute. We will leave when the occupant of Moncloa is gone, whether he resigns or something else happens that forces him out of office. We are facing a criminal organization, not just us saying it, the judges say it, everyone says it now, a criminal organization that has Spain held hostage. So the difficulties we've had, to answer your question, have been minor. And right now, everyone knows that we're going to keep being there day after day after day. And well, we'll be there until we turn things around and Spain gets back to what it has always been. A true democracy with people who believe in what they do. And really, we can't spend another minute sitting on the couch with our arms crossed, just waiting. How is Spain being destroyed by all the measures that the occupant of Moncloa and his henchmen are taking every day?
Do you realize that if all Spaniards who think like you, who are the majority, did what you do, this would be over tomorrow? What about the rest? Are we asleep, or are they not paying attention to what's happening, or do they just not care what kind of Spain they're leaving to their children and grandchildren? What's going on?
That's a very good question you're asking. I think two things are happening. More and more people are becoming aware that they need to take action, that they need to get out of the house and off the couch. What happens is that people are afraid to make their views known. People are afraid that others will see them and say, look at this guy or look at that guy, afraid of being called a right-winger or a fascist, which is the first thing they say. So they are aware, but they're afraid to take action. That's one part of it. There's another group, which I think is increasing every day, that is starting to take action. Slowly, but they're moving. And there's another percentage, not insignificant, though smaller every day, that lives off the criminal organization and its patronage network. So those people will believe anything. And obviously what they're also looking for is to get more people into that group who live off handouts, who live off subsidies, and to subvert the constitutional order and democracy like they're doing right now with, for example, this outrage, this high treason, which is this mass legalization of illegal immigrants that has never been seen in any country in the world. This is something unheard of.
I was very happy seeing how you were all there, young people, older people, ladies, gentlemen, with the buses passing so close to the banner that if you're not careful, they'll run you over. Not easy at all. Congratulations on those 900 uninterrupted days. I would like you not to reach 1,000 because he'd already be gone, but I'm afraid you'll surpass that. You'll see, we're always going to support you, and here you have your platform, Miguel Angel Alvarez. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you for being our megaphone to you and your whole team, because obviously the work you do takes a team. We hope to leave before the days are up, but we're prepared to stay much longer. Not only that, if there's a change of government and the next government of a different party doesn't do what needs to be done for Spain and the Spanish people, Spaniards first, national priority. The Spanish people, we will go to other locations, we will go to other places. For us, this is already a continuous mobilization because we've made this a way of life. We don't do it for the spotlight or to be recognized for anything at all. We do it simply to follow our conscience and for the good of Spain and the Spanish people.
A big hug. Send it to all your patriots in Burgos. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Albert. Thanks, my friend.
It's a pleasure to have so many friends in Caracas like Marta.
Hello, Mr. Albert and your whole team. I'm speaking to you from Caracas. I wanted to congratulate you for all your work and all the support you have given us.
Siempre. Always, since we are the same Spaniards and Venezuelans. The only thing is that here many have behaved very badly toward Venezuelans, and I'm trying to make up for what so many shameless Spaniards have done and are still doing. But anyway, Lola, thank you. You give us strength. You know there's a problem with YouTube's algorithms that don't promote you. Well, Lola says we shouldn't worry.
Don't worry, Albert. No matter what YouTube does with its algorithms, we'll look for you, like Pedro Sanchez said about the votes, we'll look for you under every rock.
It's true that he said that. And you have to look for votes under every rock. And that's where the fraud started. Thank you, dear. A kiss, Lola. Well, Angelinus and many others have sent me this scene as if they were the Muppets with Sanchez and Bolaños, which they call Grasita Bolaños.
Bolaños, you see how far I've come, right? And how handsome I am.
Of course, Sanchidad. Do you recall how it began, your Adonicity?
No, I do, Mortadello, like it was yesterday. So much for the father-in-law's business?
No, not so early on. I was referring to the humble Pojo and such.
And you said she's your niece?
Yes, very distant.
Here you go, Mortito. I picked up your clubs at Faraz as you asked.
Ah, those were the days. Great statesmen also have humble beginnings.
And they only took the Peugeot a couple of times. It was actually a 70,000 euro Mercedes, which Ketty mentioned in her book. Well, get ready because there's more. Oscar Puente, not Sesame Street, no. Sauna Street.
Today on Sauna Street, a day with Oscar Gutan.
Shameless fascists. Only Pedro and I are democracy. The media are Nazi trash, a loudspeaker for the far right. The judges are coup plotters. Good day for the...
Mr. Minister, a breakdown has brought Atocha to a standstill.
And why are you telling me this, idiot? But what is this sack of shit journalist writing?
Minister, a breakdown has severed the Madrid-Andalusia connection.
Go fuck yourself, Pedro. You're the best, the most handsome, the fucking boss.
Go on. Don't stop, Gutancito.
Never had Europe. What am I saying, Europe? The world had never seen a leader like you.
Oscar, blocked. Your turn to speak. Blocked. Oscar, can you hear me? Blocked. Oscar, blocked.
Hey, look, the welding report we couldn't find.
It's the real Oscar Puente. It can't be done any better. Well, and Miguel sent me, with a lot of humor and irony, a photo where you can see the Performing Arts Office. Please tell Sanchez's brother, Miguel tells me, that I found it. You know, the judge was asking him, where is the Performing Arts Office? Well, it must be in the Performing Arts. Soon, in a month, standing trial. Let's see if he finds his way to Soto del Real, which is a beautiful place and has a facility there where he would be very comfortable. And the AI in the town that I loved from Enrique. You see Sanchez campaigning and people from the town sitting, and then this happens.
In the town, we have two problems. The first is that we don't have a doctor. I need a doctor here tomorrow. You'll have one then. The second problem is that we don't have mobile coverage.
Which proves that he was lying, that the first call to get a doctor was fake, very much made in Sanchez, huh? Well, and the April Fair is underway, and who's out there? With artificial intelligence, Donald Trump.
No. I can't believe it.
The camel race mating, I want a big doll. What joy, what a commotion. The pilot lost it for us. Good Lord, I love the fair. This is Sevilla's famous big Ferris wheel, an international legend. Every summer, people talk about this amazing moment, right? To finish, I'll leave you with a dance at the Izquierda Unida booth.
Dressed in a flamenco outfit. Wow, it's crazy. Eating, drinking, Donald Trump would have a great time at the April Fair, right? If he hasn't been, I recommend he go. And let me finish by thanking Luis Miguel Alonso for his donations. I loved it, Luis Miguel, because you say, donation note friends. There's nothing more to say. Thank you, my friend. And Benedicta Migueles. She's wonderful. She made a donation and sent me a message. It says, thank you for the magnificent information. Benedicta Migueles, I'm your fan from today on. Well, and get ready because we already have a bunch of devices. It's become like the glass-breaking device. Or whatever you want to call it, they've already gone on sale with the show's logo. We've sold almost half. In one day, well, when they're gone, they're gone. We got 100 here, we made 100, and when they're gone, that's it. You know, it's a car window breaker in case you find yourself in an emergency situation. It's a little keychain that all law enforcement officers carry, and it also has a Gillette blade to cut the seatbelt. This is to carry with your car keys, and besides, it advertises our name. Thank you. It could save your life, absolutely. You can get it for very little, and you help fund the program. Email address, albertcastillon7@gmail.com, albertcastillon7@gmail.com. If things keep going like this, we'll run out this week, so don't fall asleep on it. There are people who buy 4, even 12 to give to friends and family. Well, as long as I have them, they're yours. Thank you. Friends, more tomorrow. I want you right here in the trench. Big hug.
Somos confidenciales, tú eres confidencial, yo soy confidencial, todos confidenciales, todos confidenciales, pero solo para mentes abiertas y para gente.
Thank you. From the trench, the bullets whistle and there's no way out. To get out there, here freedom has wings of wax. Albert Castillon 7.
Oh, Susana Gash.
You girls, you and me and everyone else, thank you very much. Like
con esto y un bizcocho hasta mañana a las 8.
Castillon Confidential by Albert Castillon.